Thank you,
Hi.
Patrick. Thank you. Nice to be here and welcome, Amy. I mean, we're having really a conversation, but it was kind of my direction that Amy's going with. So, should I just jump in, Amy, and explain where this started?
Let's do it. This seems like such a great group. I'm
Oh,
excited.
yeah, it's a great group. This is a wonderful community. So, here's how this started. I did a podcast with Tammy Simon around my book, Growing Up with Addiction, and this was just recently, within the last month. And we talked about, she asked me a lot of questions about growing up with addiction, parents who are doing drugs, alcohol, and so forth. And then she kind of leaned into the camera and said, "What about food?" And I said that is certainly an addiction, and it is certainly an addiction. It becomes a family uh, problem. And growing up with it is impactful, but I really don't know how to give you a good answer on that. So the next time Amy and I were together, I think I was on your podcast and I asked you about that, and I have never gotten a better answer as to why parental food addiction is so impactful. Maybe I'll start with one of my two stories, Amy, to set the stage, because Amy's got a story with her father. When years ago, we had a boy overnight, or no, playing it in our apartment when my children were young. They're in their 40s now. And his one of the family members had a food addiction, a big, long, serious food addiction. And my daughter came into my room looking just white as a sheet, and she said, I just saw, because I had made blonde brownies. I used to make, these things for kids, and they ate them when they wanted a treat, and other than that, not really. Um, but this boy had gone to them and done this in the pan, and she showed it to me, and it looked like an animal had made prints, all dragging him up and down. So that really shook her up. But when you talked about cravings, and I'll let you take it from here. Yeah, I know you what to say.
The craving, there's so much underneath cravings. You can
Yeah.
look at, is it craving just a food because I'm hungry? Am I craving because I'm actually hungry? Or am I craving because there's some unmet need? And when it's due to an unmet need, there will be this increasing sense of anxiety, dysregulation, restlessness. It's no longer just a craving and I'm hungry, I'm going to mix together a salad.
Mhm.
Now it's this ravenous survival
Mm.
anxiety that starts to take over. And it's going to affect not only what you do, but then everybody in that atmosphere, everybody in that space, everybody in that room, everybody that you affect, because your brain just went into fixation mode on food. And it's not just any food. And that's where we get to become really curious about, well, what am I craving? Or if it's not me, if it's another person, what are they craving? And there's so much that we can tell about what that unmet need is based on what specific food they're craving. Is it more of an emotional need? Are they experiencing something, a sensation in their body that is uncomfortable and they want to numb that?
Mhm.
Want to avoid it? They want to distract themselves from it? Okay. But what about relational? Are they experiencing loneliness? Are they experiencing a desire for connection, but don't know how to do that connection? And so there's this tension that starts to develop around the rejection and potential abandonment. There will be that sense of craving because it feels like something from a previous relationship experience. Maybe
Mhm.
the food reminds me of when my grandmother would welcome me. And there was just so much love and nurture. It was maybe the only place that I felt seen. Well, when I'm not feeling seen now as an adult, guess what I'm going to crave? I'm going to crave that feeling that I had with my grandmother, and it will be that specific food that reminds me of her. whether that's consciously or not. And then there's a whole nutritional piece. And this is what often gets forgotten when we talk about cravings and we want to call it just a food addiction, is that we have nutritional needs.
Mm-hmm.
And these needs are real for our nervous system. There are things like, I need more zinc. I need more serotonin. I need something that I don't have enough of. And because I don't have enough of that vitamin, that nutrient, I am more on edge. I am reaching the end of my capacity. I'm going to fall apart. And we can see this as emotional because it looks the same, but underneath it as actually a nutritional need that's not being met. And again, we can look at, well, then what specific food are you craving? Because if you are craving something like celery and broccoli, well, that's not suggesting that you are low in serotonin activity. If you are low in serotonin activity, your body is unconsciously going to be craving the turkey, the chicken, the pistachio nuts, the cashews. You're not going to know why you're reaching for those almond clusters or that trail mix and not something else. You just do it and not realizing that these unmet needs are not only driving the cravings themselves, but the cravings for that specific food that you're reaching for.
Okay, so that's the biology of it, right?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And I think you're right that that gets left out because we're always talking about the addiction and the addiction to sugar and to flour, and it kind of stops there. When you talked about your father, and this was so interesting to me because it's the growing up part with that I think you said didn't because of some belief didn't eat certain foods. And so you learned as a child to sense when he was craving and to understand the food he was craving. That one was kind of remarkable, except that kids, this is a part we don't talk about. And in any form of addiction, what kids learn about their parents and understand more deeply than even the spouses understand it.
This is so true because as a child, we are more in tune with that relationship. We
Mm-hmm.
know that we have to maintain that relationship at all costs. And so we are always attuned to their relational state and availability to know, how do I interact with them in this moment? Who do I need to be for them to not reject me, to not push me away, so that my needs get taken care of and I can survive?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that the child becomes more tuned in to the food relationship of their parent than the spouse or their close friends. And so the child is tuned into, how does this affect me and my relationship with them? And so there was a time when I was around 15, 16, and I'm standing in the kitchen and my father walks in. He worked from home, so this was not infrequent for him to do this. And he walked in and I could feel, palpably feel, without even seeing him, because he walked in from behind me, I could feel that he was in that, I need food and I need this particular food right now. It's fascinating that I would know that. It's fascinating that I would already have developed those senses that I would feel that. And that's exactly what the child will do, is that they will be able to feel their parents' relationship with food and know, well, maybe it's in relationship to alcohol. My father needs a drink right now. Or for me in my home, my father needs his snacks right now. My father needs this. My father is looking for that. And if I can even be the one to give that to him, even that secures my relationship with him more.
Now that is, so that on the food level I get, because a child bringing food to a parent, um, that's sort of acceptable. But when you're bringing in the survival piece, and I better get that piece of food to my parent fast, right? Or something snarly is going to happen, or something rejecting, or something's going to explode, or or they might just go elsewhere, right? Just get very dissociative. Can you speak to those states that a parent might go into?
So when we have this survival mode for food, then everything becomes so narrowly focused on that's what I need and I need it right now. So if a parent is now entering that state and progressively getting deeper into that state with every second that passes, then if their child has some need, maybe their child needs a glass of water, maybe their child just injured themselves, fell down, scraped their knee, and they're coming in for comfort, they are not going to be getting that attunement and presence from their parent. When the parent is in that fixated mode of, I need this food right now, that is the only thing that they can be present to. The only thing that they can be present to. The mind can really only be present to one thing at a time. And so it's either the food or the child.
Well, okay, here's an interesting thing because children, people who have weight, I'm sorry, it's the park is full of blossoms right now.
Yes.
Um,
Allergy season.
yeah. Um, Children who have parents with eating issues often have them themselves, right?
Exactly.
So can you describe that co-state? I think you touched on it here in saying, you know, it's a way to not lose the parent, right? To enter into this behavior with them and to please the parent and to also not reject the parent who's I know my mother was very loved sweets and she was always trying to get me to eat sweets as rewards as this as that and I didn't really like sweets and it probably caused a kind of a rejection of her on my part. But can you touch on that? Because that's a truly sad phenomenon when you see the parent having having disordered eating, and then you see the child taking it in and adapting the behavior.
It's actually quite similar to what you describe as these cycles of the use of the substance. And there's this pre-use phase where progressively the parent is becoming more and more obsessed, and that's the only thing that they can think about. They're consumed by it. And during that phase, there's really not availability for relationship with another because that's all consuming. Once they've consumed, now you have this window in which they have had their anxiety quelled and they're looking for that sense of connection. I'm not alone. And that's a key window in which many children with their parent will want to be there because they realize that's when my parent seems to care for me the most. That's when I seem to actually have access to my parent the most, is when we're sitting down to eat that cinnamon roll, when we are cooking pastries together and eating them at the same time. And so why wouldn't I, as a child, adapt to that in order to have the connection that I need? It's not in the way that I would want to, but I need that connection. And as children, we are the ones who are going to adapt to that. So it's very similar to what you've laid out in your model for this, the availability of a parent for the relationship in these different phases, the pre, the kind of under the influence, and then the post and that beginning of the withdrawals.
The interesting thing about food to me is that with alcohol or drugs, there is a built-in boundary. Now, a lot of kids talk about discovering alcohol and drugs at 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, but food starts tiny little ones. Little toddlers are, and does it become a shared form of co-regulation so that it is, in a sense, a transitional, children have these transitional objects, right? Teddies and stuffed animals and things they take with them that is transitioning the parent into an object that they can hold and control. And they can take them from place to place. But is food both becoming a form of co-regulation with the parent, shared regulatory state, and a transitional something, substance?
I find it interesting that our relationship with food begins very, very young.
Mm,
And it's very much, it is going to follow our parents' view and their relationship with food. Let's even go back to when we are newborns and we can't even feed ourselves yet. What was that process like? When was food offered as the solution? Was it offered whenever I was fussy and food just became the solution to all upsetness? Here, be quiet. Was this a time for connection? Was it the time of with the breastfeeding, a time of actual connection? Or maybe I was breastfed, but I was under a blanket and my mom was busy and talking and working, and there wasn't the relationship
mhm,
with the food.
mhm,
Or
mhm,
maybe I was bottle fed and maybe it was here's a bottle, shut up.
mhm,
And then we look at toddlers. And still to this day, I see this phenomenon happen quite a bit. Family walks into the bank and the child starts to become a little upset, a little unquiet. They're children. And what are they
mhm,
offered? A lollipop.
mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah.
so food now becomes the solution for everything.
Mhm,
If you're upset, here's food. If you want a reward, here's food. But it's not as much a part of the relationship as we would want it to be. So then that's where the dynamics of our using food to feel a certain way and to create connection in a certain way starts to develop. Because if I can see that, oh, my parent wants to connect with me in this specific way, in these specific moments, I am going to bend over backwards as the child to be who they want me to be in those moments. Of course, sacrificing myself and who I really am for that relationship, but that's what I'm going to do as a child. And so the dynamics of that, I will be who you want me to be in order to have the connection that you're willing to give me at this moment, actually starts much, much younger with looking at what were the early experiences of food in a relationship and in connection. And
See,
if a
that's the
person
thing.
thinks of their parent now, I'm sure that they can think of, well, my parent would have been the one to kind of, shove a bottle at me and be like, shut up. I
Yeah,
need to get
yeah,
work done, right?
yeah. But when you bring in the relationship and the the subtlety and the subtle dynamics and the even the ability to read your father and figure out which food, you were talking about that. You could figure out which food he needed.
Yes. Now, we were a family that, because of our beliefs, did not eat a lot of protein, and there was no animal protein. So we were vegetarian and then vegan. And part of my dad's challenges that I understand now was that he really had some neurochemical imbalances. He
Mhm.
would have been started on a mood medication if he had ever gone to see someone. He was adopted at birth and had struggled for all of his life with his moods and his regulation. And so then to be on a diet where there was not protein to make these neurotransmitters that he was deficient in, dopamine, serotonin, GABA, these are neurotransmitters that we need in order to feel well and to cope well with our life. And not having those nutrients then would lead to this almost binge eating type of approach. And so I could definitely tell based on the type of dysregulation that he was manifesting, based on his pattern of walking, based on everything about his body language, what he would say, how he would say it, how he was not happy with anything and anybody and would take it out on anything and anybody that was in his circle. Those were the times when I came to know he needs food and he's looking for this kind of food. And part of that is because like that's what I had seen him do. I had seen him come in and grab this food, these snacks so many times that I knew what he would be foraging for.
So you
I
learned it.
knew.
You learned from
Mhm.
watching him and sense. So I have a question, personal. My mother was she never struggled with weight much when I was a child growing up with her. But after my parents' divorce, after there was a lot of trauma, she was married again to a wonderful husband and stepfather. But that's when the eating disorder blew up. And I could go on and on about what I imagine was part of it. I think that just the disruption being Greek and divorcing and da da da. But in fact, we all loved our stepfather. Um, but here's the connection I'm asking Aimie. When I was young, if I kind of follow your thinking, she would she kept grabbing sweet foods, and I associate it with her being confused. And I'm thinking anxious now. And then it translated into a trauma solution of some sort, or a uh, maybe a lot of touch went out of her life when we went from a family of six to a couple. Then she was basically a couple, right? With our coming in and out. And it's so multi-layered. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that the red thread is anxiety and an anxious depression that was medicated, that I read as a child as confusion,
Mm.
because she would just sort of be dissociated. And so I think perhaps I'm layering my own confusion on where's my mother now, um, and saying she was confused. I'm guessing she was more anxious and depressed.
Maybe let me share with you some of the other layers
Hmm.
of this, because
Hmm.
this might be a category that you would relate to know, like this is the category that she's in and why she would be driven to the sweets and the sugars.
Hmm.
We use food to shift our internal state.
Hmm.
And as we are reaching panic, we might reach for food in order to try to dampen down that response. But more often than not, we are in overwhelm, we are confused, we are in that paralysis, immobilization, we're more in the depressed, uh, functional freeze state, if we want to call it that. And so, this more general heaviness that is behind everything. And we're looking for food to lift us out of that so that we can get things done. So many of the sugars are actually triggering an adrenaline release. And that adrenaline is what activates the system. It brings energy into the system so that at least for the next 90 minutes while my adrenaline and sugar levels are high, I can get things done and I don't feel so much of the weight of that background depression.
I can't believe how you just honed in on. I mean, that describes exactly my experience of my mother. That's brilliant. Um, okay.
I know, right? So then we're back to like cravings. There are so many layers to it, Tian. So
Yeah.
many layers. Is it using that to meet some nutritional need because your biochemistry is out of balance? Maybe. Is it because it's creating an experience for you that you remember fondly? I felt like this with this person, and so maybe is it I'm using this to shift my state. I feel depressed
Yeah.
and I'm actually using food to not be so depressed. I'm using food to be able to stay in my marriage. I'm using food to be able to tolerate what I would not normally be able or willing to tolerate if I didn't have this food to take the edge off, to numb those feelings.
I think you've described in the kind of detail what I see as food addiction, what I experienced with my mother when, and mysteriously when my stepfather died after 34 years of marriage and a good marriage. I mean, not, she lost weight. She got lost weight. She stopped changing her hair and her glasses. She, you know,
Yeah, there's
and she
many.
fell back in love with her kids.
There you go. She was tolerating a marriage that for whatever reason, there was some degree of, I don't feel safe. I don't feel like I can be myself, but I'm going to hang in here because I need to. And for all of the reasons that she felt she would need to. And then when circumstances changed, freed her from that, sounds like she became more of her true self.
She became more of herself, certainly with us. We actually loved having Walt around,
Yeah.
but she couldn't figure out how to be Greek, be second marriage, include the children, except that he wanted to include us. He was just very waspy and included us in a different way from the one she was used to. But he very much fathered us and loved us. He didn't have his own children, and we became that for him. And my dad had died, so he just picked it up.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe your mom, like many, 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 many other people, just find relationships confusing, overwhelming.
I think you've put your finger right on it. And always has and always did. And adores relationships at the same time. But that dysregulation and having to have control, and you have to, and this is where the trauma comes in for me, is that I don't think I could say enough times, and it's very hard to hear. Middle ground is where life is. Middle ground is where happiness is, 4, 5, and 6, not on the extremes. So that if you can't make a friend in the extreme. You can't make a friend with yourself in the extremes. You can't have a happy life in the extremes. You can't think and feel together in the extremes. But 4, 5, and 6 for people who have been shocked and not been able to work it through feels like you're skating on thin ice and you're going to fall through. And do you want to respond to that in any way, Aimie?
I feel that tension between I want the connection and I want the relationship, but I don't know how to do it and I'm afraid that I'm going to mess it up
Mm-hmm.
is what then drives the food addiction. Because if I really want the connection, I need to quiet the anxiety about it. Because I can't engage in the connection with this level of anxiety about the connection.
Yes, 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 yes. And that would be true of any addiction.
Any addiction, any
Mm-hmm.
addiction. Then the challenge becomes, and of course, the nervous system doesn't realize this ahead of time. The nervous system thinks, wonderful, we have a solution. But
Yeah.
you eat the food, you're now under the influence, and you're not available for connection under the influence.
Yes, yes, yes. So
And so
then,
you've just sabotaged the very thing that you
yes.
want.
And then how does that slide around? Because there's going to be a window in there when you are, and you're going to try to find the sweet spot, and that's going to put you on that cycle of addictive craving and yeah. Okay, so
And
what do
so
you
then
think?
there's your cycle, and we now can apply that cycle to this relationship that you're in and how you're using your relationship with food to try to navigate relationships with human beings and be more available to them, realizing that actually you're still messing things up. You are not being able to be consistent. You're not able to follow through. You're realizing that other people are experiencing you in a way that's inconsistent and unpredictable. Now you're feeling even worse about yourself. So what do? You need to go eat more. And
Talk about the unpredictable, inconsistent, because I do experience people with eating issues and people, this is not a fully understood thing. I mean, not much understood at all, but I experience them as late, as hard to make a plan, hard to stick with the plan, hard to make all of that kind of stuff. Can you elaborate on what you just brought in?
I want us to think about that last time that we all overate. Whatever it was, whatever the food was, whatever the situation was,
Oh,
we've all felt the food coma.
yeah,
We've all felt the
yeah,
food coma.
yeah.
When you are in that food coma state, are you the same person who's not in a food coma state? You are a completely different person. Your energy is different. Your motivation is different. Your outlook and perspective on life is different if you're stuffed and in this food coma than if you are healthy and vibrant and alive.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, just in that, you are going to exude unpredictableness in how you show up for people based on where in your cycle of food use you are. And if you are a person who has come to rely on food to navigate uncertainty and discomfort,
Hmm.
you don't want to be far from food. You don't want to be far from your solution. And what if you go to this social event and something is said, something is done, and you get triggered and you need food, but you're embarrassed to do your binge eating or indulging in your foods in public? You have to be in private and
Yeah.
isolation for that. So now you're leaving early, and now you're thinking, well, why did I go anyway? Did I go just to be triggered and to leave early? And so then you start showing up later. You start showing up not at all. You start saying yes because you want to and you mean yes in the moment, but then that yes becomes no because of what it means that I'm going to be without my ability to regulate my emotions. And that's risky because if you see that side of me, you for sure will not ever like me again. You want the regulated me, but the regulated me means the one that's under the influence of my food.
Or my alcohol, or my pot, or my, and this is just consistent. This is the red thread.
This is where it starts to look like a food addiction.
Hmm.
Even though at the end of the day, you and I both know that this is just a solution to the inner pain and dysregulation without any other skills and tools to manage that.
And that's why this whole idea that we can just get the right insight or think ourselves better and we'll be fine. In the split between mind and body in our culture, that's still so split. And why both of us work with embodiment, right? I mean, if we did this with RTR, my model, which you do, also, there'd be a food atom. There should be a food graph we'd be cycling the food chart and all of these ways of getting closer to the visceral experience of what addiction really is. And when you talk about, I can't be far from my substance, you're talking about all of the above. You're talking about exercise equipment, or you're talking, the running track and I mean, twice I have seen relatives, in the freezer, Halloween candy. I mean, Halloween candy. Like, what a way to get a supply, marshmallows or things that are quick fixes. Um, So it's
So this is
it,
actually where I like to take that then is be able to say, I want you to draw me a map.
yeah.
When you're tired, where does your map take you? What are those
Mhm,
foods that you reach for when you're tired but need to push through something?
mhm.
When you come home and it's been a hard day, you want to reward yourself. What are those foods that you reach for? When you wake up, what is that thing that you have to have? In fact, what is that thing that you have right now that you can't imagine life without it? And why? Why can't you imagine life without that? What would happen if you didn't have access to that anymore? And this is where it just gets juicy and deep because now I'm really seeing into the heart of things. Now we're no longer just looking at superficial answers of, yeah, I emotionally eat and I,
Mhm, mhm.
occasionally will, do this. We're looking at what do you believe so inherently about yourself, about others, about life that you think you might die if you didn't have this? Is it your morning coffee? Is it the afternoon chocolate? Is it the evening wine? What is that thing that you can't imagine life without? And then let's pull back the curtain and see why. And specifically ask the question, what might happen if you didn't have access to that anymore?
See, that's a great question. I remember that. I mean, that's a question I've asked myself at different times. And the answer is usually if I didn't take charge of this thing and do it and make sure it happened, what would I fear would happen? And I would fear that it would fall apart. And that, in fact, was my experience. And
Exactly.
it has been my experience at different times. But the good news was I learned to, at a young age, develop my own life. I mean, in fact, everything did fall apart. And if I didn't get my life to happen, it really didn't. So here's the question. Emotionally, psychologically, then the answer is to not only see that, but to feel that emotion of standing, in my case, in a home where no one else was, and it had been full so recently, and where nothing, the lighter didn't work on the fancy little cigarette, or the things just didn't function. It was all still there like a stage set, but it didn't work. And then to somehow, I don't know if I've even ever really gone back there and felt just that specific feeling. But then of course there are a variety of ways to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, through psychodrama, through letter writing, through journaling, through talking, through
Yeah. Yeah. And as you think back to that now, how old are you?
Let's see, in my case, I was probably between, it fell apart in sixth grade, but in a ghosty sort of a way. People were still around. Then we all moved in seventh grade. We didn't move. We went to Greece for a year to live in Athens. It was great, actually. Came back, and then in eighth grade, my sister by then had gone off. My brother had gone off. It was a family of four with my father basically drinking downstairs. And he had been great in Athens. It was his country. Uh, so I would say 14.
And 14 is such a critical age too, because that's the age when you're supposed to be thinking of your future and having a
Yeah.
solid foundation to be able to think of what would I like to be? Who do I want to become? What do I want my life to become? But when your world is falling apart at 14, you don't even have the opportunity to think about those
Well,
things.
in fact, I did, and this is why I have trouble with books that are or anybody, anything, even though I don't say it out loud that much, but that are too absolute. You must, you this, you that. If you're in an abusive home, you're this, and it's abusive all the time. Because my home was both, and I think most homes are both. And what I did is very much in line with what you're saying. It was, it was what would my father want from me? That I lived on that question. So what you're saying is once again so spot on. That's how I continued to raise myself. If my father were sober, what because he was my strongest connection, even drunk, what would he want from me? Because he had wanted always the best. And then I was able to organize myself around what he'd want, and I just sort of picked myself up by the nape of the neck and led myself to those experiences and away from the others. But you have to have that base relationship to ask yourself that question. And some people have that base relationship with Oprah Winfrey or Leave It to Beaver. You don't always have to have, you know,
No relationship with them.
people are remarkably resilient and creative and inventive.
I think that's so much of what religion is.
There. Okay, say something about that, Aimie. Oh, okay.
I've committed to like not be religious, not be political, not be like all of these things that
Okay.
would be so divisive.
But it's organizing. It's
It's
organizing and
yes,
it sets a standard, is what you're
and it's
saying.
something outside of me that allows me to orient myself around something that wants the best for me, wants good for me,
Hmm.
and allows me to kind of find some anchor and north star when
Yes.
everything's falling apart.
On that note, on this wonderful note,
I would invite you each to just put a hand over your heart or your chest, whichever feels better to you right now. Sometimes center of my chest feels better more just for centering, but you can do heart, whichever one. And what I would encourage you to say to yourself is, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can. And thank you. What a great group. What a great group. And have a wonderful rest of your day.